This business alone is probably gross over the past 10 years, probably 120, 130 million dollars. And like all from like that kind of stuff. We do we have multiple e-commerce businesses shipping like 50,000 packages a month. We run probably 100 Facebook pages, 10 or 15 Instagrams. We have millions and millions and millions and millions of followers. We do social media better than anybody else. We have so much.
Welcome back to the Gen Z Speaks podcast. Today, we have a very interesting guest today, Marshall Morris. He is an entrepreneur, co-founder, president at HomeLife Media. He started a bunch of companies and businesses, and today he'll just be talking to us about his experiences, overcoming failures, and just, persevering through the world of business and entrepreneurship and nonprofits. So welcome to the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So, you've done a variety of different things in life, right? You've been in the Army, you've been in the mortgage business, and you now are, at HomeLife Media. Starting off as like when in your 20s, what got you involved? What inspired you to do what you do now back in like your early 20s?
That's a great question, man. I would say that I think I've always been kind of driven. In fact, like I think in my 20s, the first thing I did was like multi-level marketing. You know what I mean? Where you could buy that juice, but this is your juice. And if you buy your juice, you make money. Like that's the pyramid stuff. And I think I just always was like, hey, I wanted to do something that was meaningful, but I also wanted to do something that I could win at. I like to win. So I think early on for me, it was looking for or areas I could learn into that didn't require like a full-blown education. Like I can't build rockets, off YouTube. Now I probably could now, right? But so for me, it was like finding areas where they had high leverage, high opportunity. So like one of the first ones was real estate. Like, okay, so if I can communicate with people and I can learn how the front end or back end of real estate works, like whatever, right? Like whether it's helping people get mortgages or whether it's finding people who want to buy houses or it's buying houses myself or like whatever, like the dollar amounts are big. So like from a transactional standpoint, like you can stand and make a lot more money per transaction versus like, stacking dollar bills somewhere. Right. So for me, it was really like, okay, like I got to get something I can learn that I can become an expert in pretty quickly. And then I can make money in because that's going to open up more doors for more things. So I think I'm just wired like that. I think like I always used to buy the Halloween candy. After Halloween, like it goes like 70% off or 80% off, like the day after Halloween. And so I'd buy it, and then a week later I'd bring that out, and I'd hustle that stuff. You know what I mean? So like that's where it all started. I should like hustling sugar.
Yeah, great. I love it. It's just playing into your strengths. Like you can talk with people and get them to communicate with you, and that's what you're kind of playing into. No, I definitely like that. Kind of just backtracking a little bit. I saw on your on your page that you were actually in the Army, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Could you just tell us a little bit about that experience and kind of what lessons did you learn there that maybe, people like us who just went to college or just we don't learn that type of stuff or those types of skills in college that you learned in the Army?
Yeah, I think, okay. So for me, the military, so when I joined the military, it was to go to college because it was like, okay, how are you going to pay for this? My dad was like, nah, I'm not, like, you can borrow money, but you got to figure it out. So they were like, oh, cool. We'll pay you. We'll give you, meals. So like you get to go to school, like it's all good. And so then like I show up they load you on a bus, they drive you down there, and it's like, they scare the crap out of you because that's what they're supposed to do. They're trying to shake you and trying to bring everyone to the same page. Like, so people come with ego, people come in with whatever. So they're breaking you down is what they call it. And like 9/11s happened while I was down in training. So like basically, they told my parents when I started, like, oh, there's like, he's not gonna go to war. He's gonna go to college. Like nothing's gonna happen. And like literally the day I showed up, that changed. And so, so what happened was the idea was I was going to go to college, and then you learn you do programs and courses or whatever, and they end up paying for it. And then you serve. Well, I got right out of it. They're like, all right, well, we need someone, so you get deployed. So we got deployed. I got deployed in the U.S. And so in the U.S., I was in New York City, and they had to make sure the supplies are flying over because they were afraid people were gonna blow more stuff up, you know? So I had to work a shift that was like 7 at night till 7 in the morning, and you have to stay awake. And so it's 12-hour shift at night. It's pretty rough. So while I was there, really you have to stay awake. So I started reading, right? In the military, you learn a lot of different things, especially depending on what branch you're in. Because like I was basically trained to kill people. Like that's the name of the game. Like there's the infantry goes out and they take care of things on the ground and their support. So there's a lot of that kind of training that goes into it, from physical training to mental training and all that stuff. But you're actually exposed to a lot of people, and a lot of from all over the world, right? Because they're recruiting people from every town in the country. So I think one of the things I learned the most was actually like that to understand people at a different level. So because I was actually had to, for months and months and months, I really had to connect it with strangers, all strangers who were from all different walks of life you can imagine, right? So I got to learn how to know them, to communicate with them, to understand their needs and all that stuff. I think that played into a lot of that later on. From when I got deployed, like that's my first like, wow, it didn't go as planned moment. You know what I mean? Where it's like, oh shoot, like I was going to go to college, and that's a pretty big plan, as you guys know, right? So your plan is like, I'm doing this, and I'm gonna go do this other thing. And then it was like, no, you're not. So for me, that was a really great exercise in like adaptation, because it's like, cool, well, I'm not going for someone to teach me, but can I teach myself? And that's really where that started. Like, okay, cool. And like, I feel old saying this, but like back then we didn't have YouTube, you know, like it was like, maybe it's weird saying that because it's like YouTube. So we just had like books. So I would just be like, all right, you know, just read. And I had time. So I just basically decided like, I got to teach myself something. Well, the military taught me diversity. There's a lot of other things you learn about. I mean, like tactical stuff and all this really cool stuff that goes into it. But I think ultimately I really learned how to connect with people who are really different than me, and actually learn to build trust and rapport with them. Because like when you go into battle, like that person will keep you alive where they won't. And so you really have to, like you're put together with them, right? So you got to find a way to trust each other, like pretty quickly. And then be accountable to each other, right? So I think for me, you bring that into, outside of that, it's like a really great skill in the kind of entrepreneurial world, right? To be able to identify alliances and partnerships and people, and be able to trust and adapt and things like that. So I think those are a couple of things that really I think I carried out of that whole process, that journey, that have been really part of what made me successful.
That's really interesting. So I got a couple pieces from there, right? First off, you said like the piece that really helped you like hone in on entrepreneurship was like talking to people, getting to know them, and getting to know people that you can trust versus who you can't trust, right? And like now, like I've been out of college for about a year now. I actually got my real estate license too during college. And so I was on that pathway, and there's a lot of sharks, man. There's a lot of sharks out there. And when you're 18 in real estate, it's like nobody really wants to work with you, right? And they kind of like try to juice you and try to use you. And so I had to learn that the tough way. Another portion, like my dad is a Marine. And so I thought it's like interesting because I grew up knowing military members and how their thought processes and all of that. And, I asked some of the similar questions that like Ibrahim asked you earlier, or Jenish asked you. And something that really like stuck out is like that mental fortitude that you build, right? Like there's a type of discipline that you learn in there just because what you said, they break you down. Like that's the goal. It's like, you're not Marshall anymore. You're the US Army now. And I think that's interesting. And it's really critical that you were able to not fall into that, but you were able to still be an entrepreneur after the fact, right? And you weren't like so stuck on, oh, this is what's right, this is what's wrong, and like this is how I need to go. How did that play out? How were you able to maneuver around that mindset?
So like that's actually, I think I learned more about myself in that, because like it's very easy in the military. It's very easy to plug in, take direction, and really not think for yourself. It's actually built for that because it's more effective, right? So like if you can follow a plan, then that's usually better. And I found that I was actually more of a creative, critical thinker. Like I can follow a plan, but I really like to think outside the box. And so I think it challenged me a lot because I realized like this is how I'm wired. And then a lot of people are not. And it was like, that was the part that was the hardest because I think that through that process, I identified like this is a strength of mine and this is a gifting. And so like I have to like nurture this, right? Like if you're a critical thinker and you're bumping, because I mean, that's the opposite of like, this is just, hey, shut up and follow. Like you just, here's the plan, go. And so I think I learned a lot about that. So I think naturally I was already wired like that. And I think in that season, I recognized that how strong that gift was because of how much friction I had during that time. Like it was such a rub that I'm like I couldn't ignore it. And then that not being able to ignore it made me realize like, oh no, this is actually a gift. It's just in the wrong spot. You know what I mean? So I think naturally for me, that was me more learning about my gift, but I think I'm wired like that. So it might be, it's easier for me and it's probably harder for other people.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. And you know, I'm not comparing college and school to, you know, the military in any sense, but, you know, even in school, a lot of what you're taught is just like, you know, you do it this way, and that's how it is, you know, there's no, a lot of professors and classes, they don't give you that ability to think outside the box and think of like different ideas. It's kind of just like, this is how it is, and this is what you're gonna do, and you're gonna graduate and get a job. It's kind of like an assembly line, right? And I feel like a lot of institutions kind of have it in that assembly line format where people are just indoctrinated into it, right? So I definitely agree with you on that. You know, I wanted to ask, how was the transition like? So after leaving the army, right? How did you adjust back into like, now what should I do? Do I get a job? Do I start a business? What do I do now? Because I feel like, you know, a lot of veterans that get out of the military after they retire or they leave, it's kind of confusing. It's a confusing time. They don't know what to do. They don't know like what's next in life. So how did you handle that?
Well, I would actually, it's probably also like college. Like you get out and you know something, or you think you do, and then it's like, wow, that's a little dated, you know. Or you go get a job and it's like, wow, you know, like I'm actually have to relearn everything I'm going to use to like actually run this job, right? Like it's starting new. I think you just got to get tumbled. Like that's the only way to do it. Like you just got to get out there and get your butt kicked. Like I think that's the only way. Like especially if you're a kinetic learner, so you learn from like doing, right? That's the only way. And what that means is you go out there and you try to sell something, you try to start a business, you try to like find a way to make money, you try to get a job doing something, you try to learn a skill set. Like I think in your 20s especially, it's just like get tumbled as much as you can, right? Because like it's way easy. It's a like the more responsibilities that you have, the more repercussions of being tumbled. You know what I mean? So like meaning like if you have mortgage and you have family and you have all this stuff and then you get your butt kicked, like then you have to actually, it's far more complex of a scenario, right? Because you have kids and all these things going on versus like, hey, just a dude like, or a woman just going out there and giving it and trying it. Because like what you learn is the most valuable part because it's something that can't be taught. Usually what we learn is things that become what other people want to know, you know? And that's the gold, right? And so you can either make money teaching people how to not do what you did or what you learned, or you can use it to make money doing something else. So I think that for me, whether it be in college or whether it be like whatever your process was at that age, and now you're like, okay, what's next? It's like you just got to get started. Like the sooner you can do anything and get feedback and learn, the sooner you're going to learn your skill set, and then you're going to be able to work on actually sharpening that.
I think the reason why a lot of young people struggle early on is a lot of us are scared we're basically scared of failure, to put it plainly. We're like, scared to mess up and not be in a position that seems comfortable. A lot of us don't seek discomfort, and I think we should be seeking discomfort, like you said, by just doing things. Right after you leave the army, you went into the mortgage business. Is that right? Or what was your first, hustle out of the army?
Yeah. So same thing. Like this has been a journey. So learned real estate, got my license, right? So like, okay, what's next? Same thing. Like, oh, you got to like know people. It's a pretty complex transaction. And like, I got to be under somebody. Like you just, like, and this, you're learning the whole time. Right. And then, as you're learning, you're like, oh, wait, okay, there's this. And so, there's an area over here in real estate that actually could make sense. Right. So you just kind of, it's the progress. So that's kind of how it went, but really it was like, out of real estate, learning, doing other jobs. Like, okay, so it's like this, how, like, if you want to make a living, you either have to work, a job where there's a cap potential, meaning like, hey, I have a salary or an hourly, or you work a job where there's maybe uncapped, meaning like, hey, if I do well, I can make more, right? And the same amount of time. So I'm like, okay, well, I want to make more, right? So like, I would find jobs that would allow me to do that. So that could be anything from like, I think early in the day it was like cell phones, because it was like, cool, hey, you need a cell phone? I got cell phone, like, hey, if I sign you up, I get a bonus, like all these things, right? So you're doing, and you're learning how to really work with people. Ultimately, you get paid to work with people. So that's how it started. And eventually I kept learning real estate and doing all that in the meantime, and trying to find ways connecting, like, okay, where can I fit in here? Because I knew that there ultimately on a transaction basis, you can make a lot more money, which opens up more doors and more things, right? If you want to invest it or grow things or whatever. So eventually, so just doing all the sales jobs, again, just trying things, right? You get to the point where like, okay, cool, this opportunity opened up, and it's like, all right, well, I've been studying real estate, I understand it, I've been sharpening my skill set, I've been learning, I've been, doing things, and then, okay, now here's an opportunity. And then that was really where, like, okay, cool. And at that time, I was like so sharp at that, like, because I've been, like, when you go selling cell phones, you're making like an extra $100 to making an extra 10 grand a deal. Like, it's like, and you're doing the same skill set. It's just, you're like, yes, like, this is great. And you're like, this is awesome. Because, but again, you've been really sharpening yourself. Like, you're doing something to get better and better and better, even if it's not where you want to end up, or it's not the final thing, right? It's just a process. So, so that's the process. So really it's going through that, interest in real estate for a lot of reasons, right? And then in addition, then really the right place, the right time. So that's a big factor. It's like, you have a skill set, you're learning, you're adapting. Sometimes you can be in the right place at the right time. And that was just the timing of the markets, the timing of the opportunity, things like that. And so I moved into that. And so that was itself a journey, right? And then the next part of that, which is probably not in there, is I was like, hey, I can do this myself, right? Like, let's do it myself. So, I met a woman there, and I'm married to her now. And so we were like, hey, let's do this. Let's start our own thing, like, whatever. And like, okay, cool, let's do it. And so that was really the first. And like, okay, well, we'll use credit cards. We'll go after it. We're just gonna go. And then so master the skill set, became the best at what I was, because just by just trying, learning. And then like, once I was the best at what I could do, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do it myself, right? And so there's that progression into it. And so and then it got really crazy from there.
Dude, that's awesome so far, man. It's just like that whole process. That's kind of how honestly, no. So while I was in college, my whole process was, I'm either going to become, like, I was a business major. So I was like, I'm going to either become a management consultant or go into commercial real estate, right? Like, the highest ROI is after college. And so you realize, like, Deloitte and some of these consulting firms, it's ridiculously hard to get into, right? Unless you know somebody. So I was like, okay, I know somebody in commercial real estate. Like, let's try this avenue. And so what I did was, while I was in college, just trying to learn how real estate was working, I did residential with Keller Williams. And then I joined commercial real estate out of college and was doing industrial. And man, oh man, you learn, like, the whole pitch with my team was, you're going to get burned, dude. You're going to get burned. Just jump on the phones, go talk to people. And the more you get burned, the more you learn. And now I'm not in commercial real estate. I'm in commercial project management. Similar situation, right? Like, you kind of figure out, you're in the field, like, that's the whole goal. Learn like the key of the economy, which is real estate. And then you kind of like level down and see what works. And so now I'm in commercial project management, but I think that's like the number one thing. Like, everybody's afraid to fail in the beginning, but it's like, the more you fail, the more you learn, the quicker you learn. I don't know if you've heard of this guy. He's a YouTuber and serial entrepreneur too. His name's Alex Hormozzi. Have you heard of this guy?
I might have, actually. Name sounds familiar. Does he? Yeah.
So I'm like obsessed with this dude, man. Like I really want to meet him. He's awesome, dude. He sends out like the most value per minute, like on his videos. And he just talks about exactly what you're saying. Just get burned. You're going to fail. You know, I guess he started out like I'm 21, but he was about like 22 or 23, saved up like 50 grand. And he was like, screw this. I don't want to be a consultant anymore. And he just started his business. And that's just kind of the way it went. Right. And it went uphill from there, but it doesn't always go uphill. Right. But you learn from it. You learn from those mistakes. Out of curiosity. So like 1 year in the mortgage, like you jumped in at the perfect time, right? In 06. And so like in 08, how did that feel?
So this is where I got crazy. So, all right. So we launched our own business maybe 90 days before everything fell apart completely. Okay. So like just maxed out everything. I was like, hey, we're going all in. Okay. Doing it. Like it's working, you know, and I'd never been through a cycle before. So one thing, like we're kind of starting to see with a recession, basically it's like, there's kind of resets that happen in a cycle. And so I'd never been in a cycle personally. And so there's this mindset like, oh, this is just keep going forever. Like I'll just build something and, you know, it will just go forever. Things happen in cycles always. They're just secular. So like, so basically one day it was just like, hey, so I put all this money into it and stuff like that. And it was maxed out and like all that. And like it just, one day it was just like all the banks are like, no, we're not taking anymore. Like it's done. It's over. And then it was like, oh shoot, you know, like what? And then it's like, so then from there it's like, okay, well then, so I'm like, all right, well, what do? You know, what's still alive? All right, well, commercial real estate. So like, all right, we're going to flip to that and try to figure that out. And then from there, like if there's a lot of people who have properties, they're getting foreclosed, not only real estate, only residential and things like that. So then it was like, okay, well, where's another area in this market? Okay, hard money, which is basically private people loaning money at high rates for people who couldn't get a bank loan. So it's like, it's capital, but you're going to pay for it, but it's capital. You need it. It was like, so it would be like you own a building, you want to do rehab and banks are all shut down. So you see this progression. And that's kind of like the really getting tumbled and figuring it out. Like you have to have, and this is going back to the Marines, you have to be able to, you have to convince yourself, because you have to convince yourself of a mindset, of a really a winning mindset. Like you have to convince, even if you don't believe it, you have to convince yourself, because that's the hardest part. Like we have about 60 employees at HomeLife, and one of the things we have is like one of our we have values and things like that. One of the phrases is we eat sweet challenges for breakfast. So like the point is they have to come in knowing like if you're not being challenged, then you're not playing our game. Like our game is challenged. So when you have that, and so the Marines are very similar, where it's like they get the crappiest equipment, they get the worst equipment in the worst situations, and they get put in the worst areas, and they thrive on it because from day one they're given that mindset of like, doesn't matter, you know, like I'm like, I got this kind of thing, you know. So you have to develop that, even if you don't feel it. You have to try to believe it until it becomes your reality. And that's part of that process. And so like after that, so with real estate too, as you know, you get paid when deals close usually. So there was a year where I literally made no money and owed everybody money. It was completely negative because they had business go under, like a big failure, right? Like a lot on the line, not like, oh shoot, no, that word was like, well, I have actually nothing, like I can't pay rent, you know, that kind of failure. And spent the whole year like just trying to make deals happen, like chasing deals. Like this guy says he has money and he has this deal, and you go and then you work on it for 6 months and trying to put deals together, and then it's not the reality. Like we had deals, was crazy. Like we had deals where it's like we spent 6 months trying to put a transaction together, means someone buys something or sells something, and when we go to sell, we realize the guy actually doesn't own it. Like it's some weird scenario, like really weird scenario.
That's brutal.
Like
yeah.
So it's like, so it was really rough. And then so I went from being at the top of my game, and then really getting just hammered by the market, losing pretty much everything. We were pretty much homeless. Me and my wife were pretty much homeless. And then working, really making any money for a whole year, which is like I don't know how you make it like that, but then what happened was like the humility. I had to do something to make money. Like I got to the point where like,
Right.
I don't even care. I don't even care. So like I was making multiple six figures in real estate, like easily. And then I had to get a job making $7.50 an hour, like digging trenches on a construction site. And like for me, that was, and I had to drive there in a car that was like had expired registration and that like the bank wanted back. So like that kind of like that will reset you in a really interesting way. That now I don't, and not that anybody wants failure, like nobody wants to fail, right? And it's painful, but I'll tell you, like the lessons I learned in that season, probably the most valuable that I've ever learned, you know? And I don't want that to happen again. Like I don't want to, I'm smart about how I leverage capital, right? How I leverage cash, like how, like when you take things on, like really do you understand the long-term impact, right? This kind of things. But failure is the greatest teacher. They say that, and I think it's less about, oh hey, just go out there and fail and you'll learn. It's more like, no, just really try to do stuff that you feel like adds value to the world and that you can create economic opportunity in, right? And like a lot of times where you land is never where you started. And so you may call it failure, maybe people say you failed, but it's really like adaptation, you know? And like even the YouTubers, like if you look at the amount of content they put out, it's substantial. Now they never started there, and they all started with one video, no views, right? They all did. So like they just decided to like keep doing the same thing over and over, and then end up in a spot where it's like this is working, right? But you know, that's kind of my philosophy now, and that's how I look at it. Is like you really just got to follow. It's not necessarily like if you want to fail again. It's more like you just got to follow the process, and it will get you to somewhere if you keep you know, optimizing yourself and trying to make it work, right? And most successful businesses, I know a lot of guys who have done incredible things and made incredible money and everything you can imagine. And they're never linear stories. They're like, I started this and this happened. It's always like, I started over here, right? And I had to figure it all out. And then all of a sudden I'm over here. And this is better than anything I could have imagined, kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that really, those types of scenarios really make or break a person, right? Where it's like, you know, you're making hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then now you're making $7 an hour, and now it's like, what do we do from here, right? Some people might just give up, you know. Some people might just say, you know, that's life, that's what it is. But you know, I think it goes back to what you said about the winning mindset. It's about, you know, you just got to believe that you're going to win, and you took that opportunity to learn rather than, you know, despair in your situation. So
yeah, I will say that it was there there were moments where I just felt like I gave up. Like I just felt like giving up. Like, but because like when you're at that, sometimes you can't give up because there's nothing to give up. Right? Like I was at the point where like there's nothing to give up. Like, okay, like, you know, great, you're still in the same spot. I mean, there were some really dark times there for me. You know what I mean? Like you just go through this process, especially someone who is wired as an entrepreneur, who fundamentally likes to optimize and win and like just, you know, build things, you know, and creative and a problem solver, like naturally. So it was definitely like there's parts of really like just like, man, this is like, how do I get out of this? Like, how do I get out of this? Like, you know, but I think, and I think it's okay it's a process, you know, but ultimately you have to, the only time I could, like when I really I would say came out of like that place, right, was when I just decided I had to change my mindset and see it like not as the end of everything, but the beginning. And it makes it easier to move forward. So
in those times where you're going so fast, right? And suddenly you just stop like you did kind of, you can fall into really, really dark times and thoughts. But how did you avoid self-deprecation? Because a lot of times, you know, we can just continue to blame ourselves and doubt ourselves. Like, do we have what it takes? And, you know, what we can just go through this dark process of reevaluating everything and constantly regretting, and anxiety builds up. And so how did you develop like that mental state of like, no, shit happens, it's not my fault, and it's time to move on to this next thing where I can build myself back up?
Yeah, no, I like that. It took me like rebounding from this took a long time because there are like really there's the best, I guess maybe the best word is like you kind of, as you're processing and you're feeling things, you're almost creating internal voices and trauma essentially, right? You're like, oh, I don't want that to happen again. That's really bad. Like you really do beat yourself up. So I think ultimately, I it's there's never an end to that process. It's an ongoing thing to this day. Like there were, I mean, from that period, because it was very intense, like the intensity was very high. I picked up thoughts and processes that I've had to work really hard to let go of, right? Like where if anything starts feeling like bad, what I consider bad, like things are going well, your mind is instantly your mind is almost in survival, moves into survival mode in a way that, and this happens to a lot of people who have traumatic experiences, or in business life, whatever. Your mind just goes survival mode, like no, because it starts feeling, no, I don't want that, no, like, and you start shutting down, and you start, like this thought process starts, and so like like that journey is still ongoing. I think that you have to every day just make a choice. And some days it's really easy, and some days it's really hard to just keep going. And like that can look different every single day. That can be something like I'm gonna make that phone call. Like a lot of times, there have been seasons in businesses after that too, where like I'd have a financial meeting and they'd be like, "Hey, you're losing a ton." Like we've had a couple seasons where it's like you're losing money, like completely. In your mind thinks, "Okay, well everything I have, I'm gonna lose again," right? Like I'm gonna lose it all, like everything. I'd poured all this time into, I'm gonna lose it all. Like I'm gonna lose my house. You like think these things, right? And then during those times, I always make myself do something for the business, because like it just moves my mind out of it. So like a lot of those times I would, after those meetings, I would do something where I'd be like, all right, well, I'm gonna take a product or something, I'm gonna do a video or something. Like I'm gonna just jump on camera and have to change my mindset, or have to change the way I'm thinking, like, because I'm communicating to people. So you want to be personable, you want to be there and present, you know what I mean? And not like a Debbie Downer and sad. So like I would try to find ways to kind of almost manipulate myself, right, in good ways, to try to adopt a better mindset. So I really do, the game is the mind. That's it. I mean, that is the hardest part, and that's where people. I think that's where the biggest the battle's lost. I mean, when the battle's lost there, you lost everything. You know what I mean? And that's what you see in people who like even who give up on life, or they just give up and they die, or infants who can't live, without certain things, like, and their mind just shuts down their body. Like there's just, the mind is everything. And so I think that after that journey, and being around rather really high performers as well, like you start realizing like how true that is. And then you start becoming more intentional about how you like almost guard that, right? Like and it's such an ongoing process that like there are good days and bad days, just like everything, so even if you're young, or if you're like 70, right, like it's the same battle every day. Everyone has the same battle. You're starting from the same spot, like, you know what I mean? Am I gonna walk in my mind this day and make this thing happen, like, or move myself forward, or have like the right thoughts to move whatever I want to do, right? Or am I gonna sit in battle mode, just defeat myself, right? So I think every human being, no matter where you live, goes through those every single day. So it's definitely a journey for me. I think it's a journey for everyone, like just in life.
Totally, man. It's like, doesn't matter if you're the poorest man in the world or richest man in the world. Everybody has debilitating problems, right? It's just subjective to who you are and where you've been in this world. And so it's true. It's like the mind, if you can control the mind, you can control life, right? Like that's your destiny. So, after going through this downtrodden, how'd you, I mean, obviously you talked about how you picked up, but what was the next move? What was like, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to go after it because, that's who I am.
So like, I think I was at that point where like, I had, I was willing to do anything like that. I think that was the part that I think a lot of people have struggle with is like, well, I don't want to do that. Like, or like I got to the point where like, it's just like, whatever, let's just like, I got to move forward. So here's how the next season for me was like, all right, I got to find something to do. Like, you got to have a job, you got to have income, right? And like, again, I had learned a skill set. When you learn skills, usually those skills can be applied multiple ways, and usually there's longevity to that, right? So like, when I learned how to deal with people, that was really sales. So I knew that I could sell something somewhere sometime, right? Like, just like if you pick up a skill, any type of skill, whether video editing, right, or like, podcasting or whatever, like that's a skill set, right? So like, you can, the cool thing is once you learn that and that, like you can leverage that in different places, and you can find places to leverage that, right? So I'm like, all right, I can sell stuff. So I was like I was like, all right, I'm gonna get a sales job and just start again. Like, let's just start. And all right, and it was like, okay, cool, we're gonna do that. So I got a sales job, and then a friend of mine came to me and said, hey, my buddy has a website. And I'm like, all right, like everyone has a website, dude. He's like, no, he's like, he needs someone to help him. I'm like, I'm not a web guy, dude. Like, I'm a sales guy. So whatever. So the next month I saw my friend again. He's like, hey, my friend's got this website. You should go check it out. It's like, it's about cars or something. And I'm like, that's cool. Everyone has a website, dude. Like, he's like, well, he needs help with it. I'm like, well, how am I gonna help him, dude? I can check my email. That's it. Like, I'm at this point where like, like I'm not like a tech guy. I'm not like a developer, right? Like, I can do stuff normal people do to exist with the internet, not build things. And then another month he comes back and says, hey, dude, you got to talk to my friend. I'm like, shoot, man. So I looked at this website this guy had, and I was like, oh, man. And I just saw opportunity. And so it was basically like an auto trader, if you guys know what auto trader is, but it was like performance and modified cars. It was like, if you have a souped up car, you have a car that's like really fast, you're not going to be, you don't want to like list it like alongside minivans. You want to list it to people who are like love fast stuff, right? Like fast cars or exotic cars or whatever. And that was the site, was like that. It was like people who were looking for different things, not just like stock stuff, but like just fast cars. And I'm like, okay, cool. My mind instantly goes, okay, well, obviously it's an industry. There's money there. There's people who have vehicles. There's passion there, like, right? And so I'm like, all right, like call this guy. I'm like, hey, let's meet up. And he's like, all right. So he gave me his address. I show up and like, I cannot find this office. Like, it's in this multi-business, like, people rent suites for offices. And like, dude, and I cannot find this office. And like, I'm knocking on the doors, and it turns out like this dude rents a closet in this office, and he sleeps in it. And so like he showed up, and like he opened the door, and there was like USB imprints on his forehead because he was sleeping on stuff. And so he was like, and I look over, the mail was like stacked this high. I mean, it was just like a disaster. He was like, yeah, I have this site, people love using it, and I'm like a developer, but like I don't know how to do anything else. Like, I don't know how to sell advertising. I don't know how to do anything, but like it can make money, and the site's made money in the past. And so, and I was like, all right, well, like how much can you pay me? Anything? He's like, no. I'm like, okay, here's what we'll do. I was like, all right, let's do this. Let me think about it and come back to you tomorrow. So I said, okay. And I went home with my wife and talked about it. I said, hey, there's an opportunity. I think there's something there. Like, I see there's a value, like there's people who are passionate. There's people who value in automotive industry. It's a big industry. There's people advertising in it. Like, there's got to be a way to make some money doing something. Because he already has people coming here to find cars and stuff online. So she said, oh, cool. I have this job. Like, we can suck it up. Just go for it. So I went there next day. I said, here's what we'll do. You can't pay me, but I want 25% of the company, period, like day one. And we'll just try to make this thing happen together. Like, we'll try to do something with it. He was like, okay. Cause he was literally about to shut it down. So day one, I sit down. He actually added a desk in this little closet. So it's like two dudes in this like little hot box closet. And I called Nationwide Insurance or State Farm, one of the two. And I said, hey, I have guys who are buying cars. Do you want to buy insurance advertising leads? And they hung up on me, just like, boom. I was like, all right. So I just kept calling. So basically 3 years later, we sold that for 7 figures, millions of dollars. It went from a dead website, and 3 years later, we sold for millions of dollars, and to an investment firm. And like, that would have never been possible if I hadn't been willing to like go in, and take risks. And so that journey, that kind of reaffirmed my skill set. Because when you go through periods of time where you get beat up or you get kicked down, sometimes you just really self-doubt. Like, can I do this? Can I do that? Right. it's always good to get back on the horse, just try to find little wins. And so for me, the little wins was like, okay, all right, well, what are we gonna do here? And so I had to learn all this new stuff. Like, okay, I had to learn how to run advertising online, and how that whole infrastructure works online, and data, and like how to sell people advertising, run the advertising, like all this stuff I didn't know how to do. And it was just like, all right, well, I got to figure it out. So YouTube it, figured it all out, became an expert in it. So we ended up selling the business. And I've built multiple businesses online, all from that skill set, So it's one of those things where you got to be willing to take risks. You got to be willing to fail. Not that you want to, but you believe in yourself enough to know that, hey, I can adapt, right? Like I can take failure, or what I consider failure, and turn it into a win. Like if you feel like you can always turn things into wins, or there's always a way to make something happen, then I think that it gets really exciting. It changes the way you view like potential failure,
Yeah, for sure. So like, wow, that's honestly insane, dude. You go into this place not knowing who he is, and then a few years later you come out, a millionaire. Like that's badass, right? How was that learning curve of learning? Because obviously it's so integral nowadays, like just social media marketing, and I mean, back then it was different, right? It was probably Google ads, different things. But how was that transition? I know you do like online things right now, like with your like with your business and stuff. Like how was that? How was that?
So, and I'll give you some context too. So right now we do we have multiple e-commerce businesses shipping like 50,000 packages a month. We run probably 100 Facebook pages, 10 or 15 Instagrams. We have millions and millions and millions and millions of followers. We do social media better than anybody else. We have so much that it's like hard to even explain on social, which is why it's like I'm not like it's like there's just like the tip of the iceberg. Like you guys are like, hey, you do this. It's like there's actually so much like you guys don't even know about. Like, but I think you just have to learn. Like you just have to learn. You have to be willing to learn, and you have to believe you can learn. So we live in a world now, and this is what I tell people. I think that like if you're in your teens, your 20s, or whatever, like college has changed fundamentally. Like there are some jobs you have to have certain things to get it to be able to access careers in, right, or jobs in, right. I know so many doctors, like I know doctors from Harvard who are asking me to help them start a business. I like they had this vision of like what was going to be, and they're going to go learn, but like the reality is like everything can be learned online, and with the right groups. So you can, if you're willing to learn new things, and like give yourself permission to learn new things, like there's more than enough resources out there. Like the ability to make money online now is like beyond like honestly, like if you use technology now fluently, like you understand the world, like I am pretty confident that if you really wanted to, you could replace your income pretty quickly, maybe in a few months, literally just doing something online. Like I've met people who charge $1 million a year to do hypnotherapy. I've met people who sell crystals online, dude, like crystals, right? They make 100,000 a year just chilling. Like I know people who like travel and get paid to travel. Like it's not that they have any skill set that's different at all. They were just willing to figure it out. Like that's it.
That doctor note, right? I feel like we live in a time where career paths don't have to be linear. Like you don't have to be doing one thing at a time. You can be juggling a couple of things and have different, sources of revenue coming in. And like you said, because information is democratized, like we have no excuses in 2022 to not be trying something we've always wanted to. I want to ask you about iHeartDogs.com, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you've fed approximately 32 million shelter pets, right? And I'm just curious what got you into that kind of pursuit. And it seems like you love dogs clearly, but like what made you want to not transition, but like just be a part of that process as well?
Yeah. So let's see. So what I learned, remember the first business I told you about, the automotive industry, where it was like one thing I learned was like online, if you can find a community of people who are passionate about something and become the resource for connecting them and like supporting them, you can really grow a movement essentially. And a lot of times those are disguised as brands, you know, like where you're like, that brand's so awesome, they're doing this stuff, and like it's a movement disguised as a brand, but it's powerful. So early on, really, the HomeLife Media owns multiple brands. We have like the pet niche was what we call it. So we're manufacturing our own pet supplements and things for dogs and cats and all that stuff. And so like we do that, but where really all started was social. So we said, hey, like, can we build a community of people who are passionate about like animals? In that, we learned people love dogs, love cats, like whatever respective, right? And then we found also in that niche, there's super passionate people, like hyper passionate, which you'll find in every passion, like niche, that were like, oh, I want to save animals. Like, I will do anything. Like, what do I have to do? And we're like, that's cool. And so from the day one, and this is how I built all my brands now, is they all have to change the world in a meaningful way. And it doesn't have to be the most visible way, but it has to be meaningful, right? So like, because that's where we live in. Like business has the power to change the world. Like business can, and it does. And I think fundamentally, entrepreneurs like have the ability to make really good money and really make a big impact in the world in some meaningful way. So we do it around our community. So we have people who are passionate. So if we're selling pet stuff, right, like dogs and cats or whatever, well, that community is really passionate about saving animals in shelters, right? So everything we do, whether it be we build new products or services or whatever, we'll make sure that there is a component in it that gives back in a meaningful, measurable way. So like if you buy dog treats from us, which we make ourselves, you know, we feed 7 shelter dogs, every single bag sold. So it's measurable, it's meaningful, and then that way we can celebrate it, right? And so we started with communities online in pets. We built that out, and then we started asking, what do you want? What do you guys want to buy? What do you need? Where's the gaps in the market? Like, what, you know what I mean? And then we would be like, oh, that's a cool idea. Let's go make it. Would you guys buy it? They're like, yeah. So we make it and they buy it, and we just repeat over and over. So, so that's how we got it to that. And honestly, it's really the community that drives it versus me. Like, I'm not like, I don't go, hey, well, you know what would be really cool today is like to make this new thing, right? It's really like, what does the market want? What is the passionate audience? Like, what do they want? And like, I make things I never thought I'd make. Like one of our best selling products is like a women's bracelet, dude. Like I was never like, hey, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna sell billions of dollars worth of bracelets. That's like, or anything like that, right? Or millions of dollars on dog toys. Like, no. But like this business alone is probably gross over the past 10 years, probably 120, 130 million dollars. And like all from like that kind of stuff. And so if I was like, hey, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do that, I would never have been able to make it. So you have to be adaptable. But ultimately, so our mission, what we do is try to change the world in a meaningful way and make it impactful. And we let our community, you want to do something with the community really connects with. And that creates a brand that not only has like we call it mind and heart, like people can like your brand or whatever, but they have emotional connection to your brand. It just creates a deeper, they resonate in a deeper way. And so pets that's one of the niches we serve, and that audience wants that. So we do a lot of give backs. Like we fly animals from death row all the time. Like we do flights where it's like, hey, we're gonna book a plane. We're gonna fill it with dogs who are like going to be euthanized. We're gonna fly them over here where they're not going to be. Do you guys want to jump in and fund this? And everybody's like, yeah. So we do that kind of stuff.
That's awesome. Look, you've been through a lot, and obviously, I mean, I'm not sure, but this seems to be one of your more successful ventures, right? Maybe the most. But even, I mean, I think a lot of entrepreneurs out there, even though they may be successful in what they are doing now, it might not be their most proudest moment. Like, what venture were you the most proud of?
I think it's, what I've learned is, that it's a saying, it's probably kind of cliche. It's like not the destination, it's more the journey. Like, I think it's more of being able to really work with, like being able to put a team of really rad people like together consistently, give them an amazing place to work. Like, so it doesn't feel like work. It feels like something they just really enjoy to do, right? They do, and be able to make a living doing that, like for consistently. you know? And I don't like, we've never had to do a round of layoffs or anything like that. You know, we've been through really tough seasons. So I think for me, it's actually been the byproduct of that, right? Like building these things, like, 'cause I like to build things. And so like we're engineering, the byproduct that I've really enjoyed and most proud of is just being able to create an infrastructure, an ecosystem, like the job I always wanted, which is like, hey, you know what, like your family comes first. So like if you got to stay home, that's cool. You're sick, it's cool. Get back, feel better, right? Like you want to go on vacation or whatever, go for it. Like, you know, no harsh managers or nobody who's like just really mean or just like, you know, demeaning, like respectful people who want to go crush it. And that's for me is the like that whole thing that we built as a byproduct of building brands, I think is what I'm the most proud of, and it's the most enjoyable part of everything, really. So
Yeah, it's about the people and the relationships you make, right?
oh yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to ask this one more question regarding, it's a little more in depth, I guess, regarding the HomeLife Media. Was the business self-funded, or did you get investors, to chime in? Because I always have, as someone who possibly wants to go into entrepreneurship later on, I always have this thing where it's like, how do we approach investors, or how should an entrepreneur look for investors, approach them, and pitch to them? So I was wondering regarding your business.
Okay, so I have a different perspective on this. And it's really from my experiences. Like I've always had to turn $1 into $1.50 or $1 into $2. So like we never raise money. What that means is you got to make decisions that aren't as sexy or aren't as like really ego driven, right? Which is like, all right, well, I'm going to sell bracelets, not because like economically, like it works, versus, hey, I want to really have a really high end brand of things over here that I really like, that I love, that maybe more than really the market wants. You know what I mean? So for me, it's always been that. And actually, I think that's one of the most, if I look at businesses that have been around a long time, and I've seen so many businesses come and go, I cannot tell you. I have friends who've raised hundreds of millions of dollars that are gone. Very few make it raising, very few. Not that people won't, but very few do. What I'd say is like, I always go to, can you create a model that works now without money? And then when you create that model, usually what happens is, like when you add money to a model, you're like, well, I can put in $1 here and instantly, because I have a model and it's ready, I can turn it into $3. Like that gets really exciting. Very rarely do I ever see investments work, other than, I mean, very rarely. So my perspective is like, try to build it bootstrapped. And also you have control over it. Like people, like the one thing that I get the most from people who raise money the most is I'll be like, well, yeah, we're self-funded, and we may not have like the sexiest building, right? Or like, you know what I mean? Like the coolest stuff, but it works really, really well. They're always like, oh man, like I wish I didn't raise. And I'll be thinking, man, that'd be nice to have that much cash injection, in my mind. They're always thinking, they always want my position, because it fundamentally changes the DNA of the business and what we call the soul of the business, because it's no longer yours, right? And you're just a driver, and someone else is paying for the car, and so it's a different thing, a different mindset. And so what I would say is, if you can build businesses, and today we live in a world where you have more information, you're more connected, there's more free software and things than any there ever been, or software that costs very little, right? It's like today, if you can build something today that makes money and only you keep it, like that's powerful. Yep. So I know people who are just who enjoy life way more, but you mentioned this earlier. Here's what I would say about that is, like, you need multiple income streams, period. Personally, and if you want to build a business, you need multiple income streams. So like what you want to do is try to figure out one first. It could be, hey, I have this podcast and I have a sponsor that pays to sponsor the stuff, or I brought a sponsor, and then if people watch it and they sign up, I make $100 a pop, like whatever, right? You start something, right? And then, okay, cool. Then you kind of layer on another one, and that's really how you're going to build momentum. All the YouTubers have done that, even though it doesn't seem like it. Like the amount of work it takes to do video is so freaking incredible. Like we take it for granted. We watch a great video, like, oh, that's cool. We don't know that they train for 2.5 years or something, right? Like, so there's a lot of hard work that goes in behind it. But I think from raising capital, my perspective is like, I've seen it go, I've seen people regret it 99.9. I don't know anyone who didn't regret raising money in the end. Because also, it changes dynamics. Like a lot of guys who raise money end up with very little money at an exit. And people think like, oh, I raised money. It's like, no, they gave up a lot to get there. So anyways, I think I would start with ideas that you can prove and you can run a model on and make money on without anyone else, or maybe it's a strategic partner like a friend or something. And I would start there, because that's going to tell you what the market wants. When you get money out of something, like when you get money out, it actually is a real market model. And so that will tell you more than just thinking hypothetically around kind of some kind of forecast, right? Because like all forecasts are just garbage. Like they all say we're going to do so much with so much, and this is what's going to happen. It never happens that way. Well, when you get dollars in, that's actually voting. Like when you can do something that makes money, that's where you get real market data.
Yeah,
so that's my position.
Yeah, and just a quick comment regarding what you said. It's like you're right. We have so many resources nowadays where we can do anything we want. Like for example, when Zuckerberg made Facebook, he had to literally get a bunch of computers in his like dorm to have servers for the Facebook.
Mhm.
Right now we have AWS. We pay a couple like dollars and we can host any type of websites, any type of software we want on it. So it's it's definitely, we have abundance of resources to
Mhm.
develop our ideas.
Totally.
Absolutely true. Look, like you were saying, obviously the way is to have multiple streams of income, right? So you have an active stream of income just supplementing like your side hustles, which is the current phase I'm at, right? Like I'm 21, I'm trying to save up some money so I can go do what I want to do. Right now I've saved up some capital, and you've honestly changed my mind on something. I was talking to a few e-commerce automation companies, and I was about to drop some substantial cash in order just to supplement like some source of income, right? But the deal is that they don't tell you, and that once you do your homework after the conversation, you realize, like, look, they tell you, here are the, first of all, like it's simple math, right? There's gross sales and there's profit, and they don't tell you the profit numbers. They just tell you the gross sales number, right? And you hear these numbers like, oh, if you have, a credit line of 50 grand right now, you'll make 20% off of it. Like of what though? You know what I mean? And so I was honestly going to drop down some cash for it, but you're right. Like, why can't I just go, spend 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, and just learn it myself and do it? And so,
yep. Yeah. And I'll give 2 more things on that.
yeah.
So I know a guy who just did this. Here's what happened, because you don't think of this. So someone's running the store, right? These like I'm in e-commerce. It's hard. It's not really high margin. It's low margin. It's difficult unless you're really focused on it, building high margin products, innovating it. Like, so anyways, he did the exact same thing. Okay. This is a buddy of mine. I'm trying to help him so he did it. They have to reorder supplies. That's on you, right? So they're reordering supplies on you. So they're running it, and then all of a sudden the partner's running it. Like they got in this dispute with another partner, and they stopped running it. They ran his card up. The store got taken down for Amazon because of terms of service issues. So like he's out the cost to buy the store. They ran up his credit card for $150,000. Amazon will hold the inventory for 90 days at least, right? So then now you have to go into a legal mode. Like you have to go in legal pursuit mode, because like, and that's something I've had to learn in a lot of businesses too, is like, you gotta be willing to hold people accountable in business, even though it just is not fun. Like you have to, like, if you're not willing to hold people accountable, like you're not willing to get an attorney and say, hey, we're gonna go, like, I want my money back, and follow that process, then be careful putting that money out. But here's what I would say too. Yes, you can learn. It's the other thing, I do this all the time. There are people around the world who have skill sets that just need to make some money, that are incredible what they do, and their economics are different. So like I've been hiring people in the Philippines for a long time. There's people, I have a guy now, it's like, because they in the Philippines, as a manager at a call center with benefits, you may make $300 a month, maybe. So I have a guy who's like, hey, $400 a month, and he's full time, and he's an incredible video guy. Like, so I want video, like, he cuts every, like like this dude, like, oh, you want to learn something? Cool. Like he'll take the course and learn it, and then he'll be an expert for you. Like, so you can multiply your time in different ways. It can be you learning it, or it can be you find someone who can add value as a team, so they're running on the side doing something. But there's a lot of opportunities that really comes down to is I think ultimately is what problem are you solving? Is it great enough to where people are willing to let money go for it? You know? So like, for example, what you guys are doing right now. So like your generation is still early, they have more information than anyone's ever had, and it's overwhelming. And they're seeing other people succeed, and that's overwhelming too, because it's like, well, what do they do, how they do it? There's far more opportunities. So there's way more diversity in what people are doing. It's not like, oh yeah, he's a doctor. Like, it's like, no, that person like makes pineapple something on Etsy and like does something crazy. And it's like, so the point is like, there is a generation who's just hungry for like just someone to distill it down. Like, we got everything, and that's too much, right? So it's like, okay. And so like for you guys, it's like, say you build a business out of like, hey, we're gonna unpack ventures or concepts or ideas that you can do when you're 20 plus, right? With little capital, right? And like, then you turn that into a course. So it's like, hey, here we did a podcast, but here's a checklist and here's resources, and every one of those resources that if they use it like they need it, then you get paid from every time somebody signs up. Like you create these opportunities. So there's definitely so many opportunities online. That's where it's overwhelming, I think. But that's also the opportunity. Like, people will pay to be able to cut through the noise to learn what they need to learn faster.
Us are at the stage in our lives where we just recently graduated college, and like you said, we're trying to multiply our time and our individual goals. Like, we're all currently have jobs, thankfully, and like we hope to just like you said, learn those skill sets and then just pursue our goals once we have enough capital to take those risks like we need to in our 20s. So we appreciate the advice, and thank you so much for the time, Marshall. We appreciate it. This has been a really insightful interview so far.
Cool. Yeah, thank you, man. Anytime.